a couple years ago on a new service application, I made a misstatement on a local share requirement, and Sean caught me from Mankato, and so the correction was not made in the meeting. So I have staff who are all watching what I say to make sure we get it corrected in the meeting. So we're trying to be as accurate as possible, but sometimes we do slip up, especially myself. So I'll put that on myself. So what we're going to do is talk about the agenda is how the local share works, then walk through the application process, and then some large urban implications, and then get into the budget review considerations that are going to take place this year. There's a new piece. There's always a new piece, a new wrinkle. And so I want to share that wrinkle with you. So first off, the first item I want to do is actually, I'm deviating off agenda already, Glenn, sorry. So the systems who received new service money for 2023, when we put out the notification of how much individual systems could apply for, we didn't include those amounts for those systems, and those systems are TriCap, Rochester, and Mankato. So new numbers will come out for those systems that reflect that new service money, because that should be part of your 2024 budget. So I just wanted to make that statement. Didn't send it out ahead of time because we're going to be sending out additional information as a result of this meeting. We'll do it all as a package so that you're not having to stumble over 3 or 4 different messages from us. So we're trying to consolidate it into one message back. So let's get going here. So the first thing also I want to share is the local share, how the local share works versus that number that you all received. So that number is your budget number. So of that budget number, the local share is 5%. So if you're to receive $100,000, then your local share is 5% of $100,000. So then the 95% of the $100,000 is state and federal money. Pretty simple math, but I just wanted to state that real clearly. Everybody's at 5%. So for this year, and so for operating, so that's what we just want to state there. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Mark.
Mark.
Just to your previous point, not everybody's at 5%. We have 5311 rural, 5307 small urban, and we have our tribal partners on the line. The tribal partners, their share has not changed.
Right, and that we use a different calculation for the tribal partners. It's calculated off of the deficit, and so we credit all the federal dollars that they receive directly against their budget, and then we cover 50% of the deficit. And so yes, it's a bit different math for those, and that math remains the same. This affects the other public transit systems. So if we could then go on to, so what's new? So one of the things that we have 2 locations where the information is housed, both on the website and within the Black Cat application. So we have that information. What we've done is also we have broken the application into 2 pieces with 2 deadlines. And the reason for doing that is to get the important stuff, what we consider to be the important stuff, the budget piece. That is the focal point of our whole application is the budget, and to get that budget put together, and then the other pieces to be done. You can do them together at the same time, but you have different due dates where the budget is more time sensitive than the supporting documentation. A lot of that supporting documentation we are working diligently to streamline, and so we'll talk a little bit about how we've tried to streamline it in a different type of format. And then, yeah, so let's go on here. So then let's go into the website. So here's the website. So we have developed, we're working with our communications office to build a better website. And so this is the format that our communications office has been working with us on. And so it talks about how the grant works, who's eligible, It basically is all the components that are part of our normal solicitation, but it's just laid out in a way that is very simple, plain language to be able to understand what pieces are included. So it goes into here talking about what parts. So part 1 and 2, it talks about what's included in each. So you can see clearly what pieces are in either one of those. And then it also talks about the allocation form. So what to find? Oh, yeah, that's the back end stuff. So that's the information, the allocation form and the contract award form are information that are used as part of the back end for developing the contracts. So this information is information that we have provided in the two formats. So it should all tie out together in the same message. We tried very diligently to make sure it was reflected in both. So let's see, go ahead and keep going down. Anything deadlines after you apply? Oh, so it talks about when the notifications occur and that type of thing in terms of the timing of things.
Yeah, no, just to make sure everybody sees this, July 31st is when the allocation portion would be needed to be submitted, and September 15th for all the rest related to contract award.
Yeah. So the allocation form is also the budget is the big piece in that allocation piece. So that's the terminology we're using. So you may not be that familiar with allocations. So you've all received the notification about how much you can apply for. So the numbers are basically 3% increase in budget. And then we originally were looking at 8% local share for the rurals. It's now lowered to 5. And urbans were at 20 for the regular route. It's down to 5. And the ADA paratransit was 15. It's down to 5. So there's both increased growth because of the percentage change in the overall budget, but there's also income growth from the change in local share. So just to bring that to your attention. So let's see, we also have listed here additional resources that tie out to the various pieces. One of the ones that you probably will want to look at is the budget line item guidance. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about budget line items here in a little bit. That's going to be a big focus this year. One of the things that we've taken out, that we've dropped, is we had that big labor analysis worksheet that we implemented last year. That's not a requirement this year. The focus is on making sure we have decent budget narratives. So that's, and I'm not saying perfect, but decent budget narratives for all line items. That's the goal that we're trying to reach. So yeah, I think, go ahead.
Just to be clear on the resource items, those are in Black Cat as well. We're just giving it to you in two different places, so you can go to whichever one is easier to get these resources.
Right. So these link, yeah, these two are linked. So this could be the shortcut way you get to the resources. That's a great point, Glenn. Thank you. So you can access them either way. That's the piece that's been added with the website improvement, is to be able to have better access to that information and don't always have to go into Black Cat to pull everything out every time, although it's all stored there too and available. So, all right, so let's get into the application if we could. So.
The application is shorter.
Yes. So so we have within here, we have the two questions. So what we've done is we've basically taken a lot of the forms and put them into a questionnaire format. That's from talking with communication and looking at what other states do and how this information is put together. Questionnaires are the method by which information is shared typically. That's a more customer-friendly approach than how we have historically done this. And many of our forms actually date as long as I've been here, 25 plus years. Are the same darn forms had been used. So we went in and streamlined it in terms of building it into one questionnaire, capturing all the information that we used to capture, but the new questionnaire also allows us the functionality to be able to pull data out and use data for various other reporting that might need to be done in other aspects. I know that Jean uses some of the reporting for, or some of the application materials for her procurement, or her excuse me, for her DBE reporting. So it's important to capture that information, but we're trying to make it more user-friendly. Now, this questionnaire has some benefits to it that I want to state up front. One of which is you can go in and work in the questionnaire and save it and reopen it. So it's not something that once you enter it, you have to finish it off. You go in and save and reopen. Another key thing is it's automated more so in building the questionnaire at the very end of it. After you submit it, hit submit, then you receive an email with a PDF version of what you've submitted. And so then you upload that PDF version into Black Cat. So you don't have to create the PDF. It's done automatically. What you do is just upload it into Black Cat. So that's also an effort to try to minimize the steps. We want to reduce the steps and make it easier. So also, you may recall from prior instructions, some of you I know are new, but for those who've been around a while, we a couple of years ago started developing a matrix that showed all the different components and where they go in Black Cat and where they're stored. Because Black Cat, which is our grants management system, stores information in different locales. And so this matrix is designed to give a visualization of, okay, where does this information go and where is it stored and that kind of thing. Because it's, while we try to have it all stored under the application, there are many things that need to be stored in other locations within Black Cat. And so if you do have questions about where information goes, always reach out to your project manager first. And then if you have additional needs from a Black Cat perspective or questions on Black Cat, you can also reach out to Chuck Morris, who is the Black Cat coordinator. So I do want to mention that. So I don't know as if there's anything here that really we need to go into too in depth. Most of the information is still the same information. It's been consolidated into these questionnaires, but other than that, the information, just for folks who are new, the information that goes into the application for operating is dictated by our administrative rules. And they require that we have information that's submitted as part of a quote management plan. And it's really, really detailed on what's in that management plan. So we're bound to what those rules are until we change them. So, and so that is something that I do want to mention. Laura is looking at working on the rules to simplify what is required within the management plan, and to remove that so where it can be maybe moved to a different component of our grants management system that isn't directly tied to just the application. So won't go too much more in depth. Just these are the items that are included here. I do want to mention there's a resolution required of the governing body. There'll be an edit coming out on that resolution. We made an option for you to have, for example, get that notarized. I believe that's not a requirement. So we'll be reinforcing that resolution is at your discretion. We do need a resolution, but that some of those components that we might have been misinterpreted as strict requirements are more optional. So I know that gets a little confusing when you have options versus just tell me what to do type thing. But that's one clarification we'll get out. And then we've got, you know, the contracts that you have, if you have any third-party contracts, having that information uploaded, your revenue and expense contracts, that's a big thing. And having that, those uploaded is another big piece. We are still going with we still work under the requirement that you'll submit a budget, and that budget the line items may be adjusted, and it predominantly will be due to review by our indirect cost team, and I'll get more in depth in that, but the adjustments to line items will be reviewed by someone external from a group external from OTAT. So for budgets, work with your project transit project managers. Work with them in putting together those budgets and those budget narratives, so that they can also help tremendously in that development of those. All right, so we do have here some, we want to say that there's some evaluation criteria, and these within the application, so that you understand what this evaluation criteria applies to. We evaluate the applications for completeness. So you're not being judged in terms of performance or anything like that. You're being judged, did you get all the information in we need? And so, as I mentioned, one of our big goals for completeness this year are the budget narratives. And by completeness, that means that there's a explanation for every line item that you use. We have something there. That's not always been the case for all systems and for all line items. So it's kind of a higher standard that we're trying to reach, but we're trying to get there to head off any potential problems we have when the indirect cost team comes in and starts looking at those line item narratives. Some of you, as part of the indirect cost process, experienced what it's like to try to explain those narratives, and the more upfront we can do those narratives, the better. It'll make it easier. So we have some standard pieces too here in terms of the record keeping and those types of things, the cost principle, allocation, certification, diversity and inclusion statements, the public data statements. So those are basic things. We have, when we develop our applications, we have the federal requirements that we must adhere to, but even more detailed than the federal requirements are the state requirements. So we have our grants office within MnDOT, who is working a lot with the grants that are issued, and we're a big grant making unit within the department. And so this grant office is very active in trying to develop policies and procedures to reduce and eliminate fraud. That's a big one. But to respond in effect to what, for lack of a better way to say it, what some other state agencies are facing. You probably saw in the news DHS being called on the carpet about some of their grant making procedures and oversight. And so our grant office has been working diligently to make sure that we don't run into those same type of issues. So they do provide a lot of input and review. They review every solicitation we do, and we have certain criteria that we must adhere to from that office when we put our solicitation to now. And so one of the big ones that really focused in on right now is the budget piece. So we're trying to minimize as much as possible the impact to you as recipients to have to generate additional information. We're looking at ways to gather information other than just through the annual application, because it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we can't keep doing that. We need to streamline it down. So sorry, I digressed a bit there, but let's go on down. So then we got our resource documents listed here also, same as in the website, so you can access those. And so all those are, you've got the budget guidance, you've got the guidance for service level modifications. You can modify, just a reminder, you can modify your service levels. You can change your service. You can't, your overall hours, you can't add more hours. We don't have that. You only do that when you've got a new service, approved new service application, but we're not raising service levels, but you can alter your service design and do services differently, different locations. Then the questionnaires, both locations, and then reporting requirements, which are pretty standard, and then the resolution, which I said we'll provide a little clarification on. So those are the components. So let's go into the questionnaire and just see how it works. So as you enter information, if you try to submit it as a final submittal, it may give you back an error message saying you left something unfinished. So it does have that function where it does correct that, or it does cite that. I think many of you who've ever done any type of application online, that's kind of a common feature, but that is something that does occur. Now, this questionnaire also has reminder points. Let's go down to the cover letter. Go right down there. So that cover letter one, so as you're entering that, have you uploaded? So to enter that, to actually submit that, you'll have to eventually have marked yes. Otherwise it'll give you an error message at submittal if you don't have your cover letter in. So it's more of a reminder, more intuitive in terms of it's kind of an active checklist, for a lack of a better way to say it. So it does do that. In some cases, it'll also give you a box to fill out when you check it no, and it'll give you examples of what you need to do then. And so there are places within there where it does this. The questionnaire is really built around the old forms. We looked at, can we reduce and eliminate much of the information that's contained within them? And at this point, we couldn't clearly identify what those items would be without having a place to put them other than the application. And so our strategy was, we'll basically incorporate all the data needs within this questionnaire that used to be on the old forms. So you may see, as you're looking through that, you may see, oh, well, you used to have us fill that out in a form. You're just having us do it in a questionnaire instead. And yes, that's intentional. It's to try to get away from that, the old form method, which is not as customer friendly. So I do want to mention that. So we've got, for example, diversity inclusion. So this one, for example, asks, well, have you done that? So it shows, so if you check no, then it gives you, if no, it says, please provide an update. So it does give you some instructional, so it's more interactive. So that's another side benefit to this type of format, is to have some of that ability to it's a learning document too. Keep going down a little bit farther. Yeah, okay, you want to says there. Yep. So what Glenn highlighted is, it goes back to that point of, you have it fully complete and submit, you're golden. But if you leave something out, you'll hit submit and it'll give you a red flag and say, nope, you got to go back in and fix something. So that's good. And then once it's submitted, you will get the email with PDF copy. And so you save that and then save and upload it into the Black Cat application that you're putting together. So that's what we are doing with those. Here's an example of unmet needs. So it says there, if you check no, then it says, well,
But no, this is submitting without all the information complete. So it's going to
Yep,
tell you where to fill in. Just look for the red spots.
yep, that's that instructional aspect of it. So it may be a little different for folks as they are looking at this, because you're used to doing it, just leaving it blank, because I'm not saying anybody on this call does it, but there are certain forms that we do receive that are blank, that slip through the process, and they're just blank forms within Black Cat. So or incomplete forms. So that this is something that we're also trying to alleviate. And then at the bottom, you submit it, and then you'll get, although he's got an, that's because you didn't complete it, so you got an error message. So yeah,
But no, this could have already submitted once. But
oh, there you go. Yep, you
but
can't submit
yeah,
twice. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's our an improvement effort we are doing here in terms of that information. So that's the biggest change, is how those forms and information is gathered. And I think we can move on from this. We'll open up for questions here in just a short time, but let's move on. All right. So I do, Lori, hang on just a second. You'll be the first one when we get to the open forum, you'll be the first we'll talk to. So urbans, special consideration. Well, it's specific consideration. So one thing that urban systems have is they have two contracts, the regular route and the dial-a-ride, the ADA paratransit. So we've had requests or inquiries in the past about, well, what if we want to move money from regular route to ADA? Typically is the area of growth, because as systems, that demand kind of ramps up and costs a lot. And so the question about, well, can we use our regular route money to pay for ADA? Well, it's always been difficult because it's at two different match requirements. And so that creates a difficulty. Now, this year, there's an opportunity. Since everything's a 5%, as urbans look at you basically should view it as one amount. Both your ADA and regular route budget are combined, or one amount, and you will put the money where you need to put it between the two. So you're not limited to keeping a 3% growth in ADA. You can take from your regular route and use it. You can have an overall 3% growth, but you can move between. That's the opportunity given to us because it's all at the same local share. And as we come back out of COVID, we know that it's not necessarily regular route all coming back a lot more. It could be the ADA coming back quicker, and so that gives us the opportunity to adjust for post-COVID changes. So,
Hey, Noel, this
yes,
is Laura.
go ahead, Laura.
The money needs to still remain within the same contract, though. You can't move
Oh,
money
yes.
between contracts.
Yeah. And so yes, and so we don't do it after the fact. So what this is doing is, for budgeting purposes, is part of your application, you have an amount of money to use that historically had been used for both. Well, you have the opportunity before we enter into a contract to adjust those figures between the two. You can move money between. You're not locked into 3% budget change in ADA. You're locked into a 3% overall budget increase, and you can put those between either of those two programs where you see fit in the application. But once it gets into contract, we don't move it between contracts. So Laura is correct there. Yep. Okay. Let's see. So, this is the one that I do want to be transparent with you. So we have more work on the indirect costs. It's never going to go away. It's there. So we have to deal with it. And so as part of our process this year, after you submit your budgets, the indirect cost team will be in and doing their review of the budget line items and the narratives and basically what they've done in the past. Much better, however, much better. But what they've done in the past in terms of evaluating the appropriateness of the eligibility of the funding. So they're going to be doing that. And so that's why we're talking about trying very diligently to provide narratives that can assist them in that. It'll reduce the amount of back and forth that needs to go on in terms of their review of the budgets. Again, here, it really focuses in on those budget narratives. So the more detail you can provide, the better. And there's nothing prescriptive there. And we try to get prescriptiveness out of the auditors and of the indirect cost team, and there's nothing that they really can hang their hat on in all circumstances. So I really think it's something that long term we've got to work on, just having a basic spreadsheet that does it for you automatically. But that's something the TPMs will work with you on. And again, the goal is to have a narrative for every line item you're using, so that those are all populated. And so the review, it's going to be focused on budget methodology. So the more you can explain how you arrived at the number, the better. Everybody does budgets differently. There is no one prescribed way to do it. Some people use historical trends to determine a budget. I would argue that at this point right now, historical trends doesn't really work because our costs are going wonky. So you can't really use historical trends. So you got to kind of use other methods. So, but documenting it is the big thing. Documenting. So and that's been something that actually has been the standard we've been trying to work towards over the past few years anyway. So it's just reinforcing that standard to try to get us there and get everybody on the same page. Trying to give you more information on why the need for it. I'm trying to be transparent there so that you understand what the need is. So hopefully you understand. Let's see. So I think that's it. Go on to the next slide. Enough on budget reviews. Now, as far as the amount goes that you're applying for, this is not a case where we go in and the reasonableness side of it, the reasonableness side of your budgets is built from the 3% growth. 3% in this environment, that's what we consider from our perspective to be reasonable. So you've passed that test by being 3% or less in terms of what your new budget request is. You don't have to apply for that full 3% growth. You can apply for 2% or 1%, whichever your organization wants to apply for, but no more than 3%. And that is from a funding standpoint is where we're at right now to be able to comfortably work with the funding we have available. Now, let's jump into solicitation scheduling. So do want to apologize. This whole thing of waiting for state funding amounts really compressed our schedules. In a normal year, moving ahead, February, March, we're going to have our funding numbers out. You'll know what you're funding. The goal is to have that sheet of here's how much you can apply for. We want to have that in February or March. So you have plenty of time to know that we won't have this legislative action dramatically changing things. Kind of would be nice if they would want to come across with some additional, but that's not always a given. So so I just want to mention that. So we've got the allocate, so the budget allocation portion of the operating grants is due July 31st. So that's the big piece. We also have some large cap and facilities. We need to also then work on those. And one of the big things we're going to be doing with that is going out and verifying the costs, because we know those costs have changed. And we're going to be going back to large cap and facilities and looking at costs, because we may start applying for discretionary monies for some of those. And so we need to have accurate cost numbers to be able to do discretionary, because we're going to be more aggressive in the discretionary side. We are bringing a person on to work with the discretionary grants and help develop them and project manage them. So we're really trying to expand our capacity in that area. Technology grants going to launch August 15th. So we will have a technology application of at least 1.5, maybe bigger, but at least 1.5. We will determine where the capital funds go over the next July basically. We'll be working through the capital needs and determining how much money we have available. The contract piece, the documentation is due September 15th on that side. And then large cap facilities, the 2028s, we will go for those. Those are long distance projects. So those will be shifted out later in the year. We're going to have a lot of changes just within the capital program to 2027, with a lot of the projects going up in costs. So that's the schedule. On to the next slide, please. So then this fall, we will have a September TAC meeting. You're all invited to that. That's where we get together and talk particularly about funding. And so by September, we won't have the latest funding projection, state funding projection to work from, but we will start some discussions about looking out 4 years. And when we develop our funding levels, we do look out 4 years within the office already. So we are doing that to try to read the tea leaves as best we can. And so we want to share more of that with you in the September meeting. And talk about ways of how we distribute funding and what the priorities should be. So that's coming up at that September TAC. Next slide, please. Okay, so questions. Yep, I think, did I have anything else? Nope, I think we're going to take some questions. So.
No, you have a lot in the chat. Sorry,
okay.
Mike Jones.
Yes, please. Would you state that? Ask the question. You would.
Can you see the chat?
I can't. Well, yeah, I think I can. Just a second here. Yeah, let's see what we got. Oh yeah, there I got it. Yep. Okay. Okay. Start with.
You go up to the top. Mike Jones, I think, is the first question.
Yep.
Not that far up.
No.
Yeah.
Mike Jones works for Leech Lake Tribal Transit.
Yes.
Just as a name.
Yep.
If you wanted to.
Yeah. Go ahead. Mike, do you just.
Oh, the question, Noel, the question is what happens if they're not listed? And we did not list the tribal transit in the table because of the federal formula that we applied to their submitted grants.
Yes. So how we would deal with that is similar to, for this year, is similar to prior years. So you can submit a budget request up to 3% greater. So or up to 3% greater, just like the other transit systems. Now, what you actually receive, however, is influenced quite a bit by how much we credit back from your federal funding you get, the discretionary or the formula monies from the 3 tiers. So we'll use the same mathematics to arrive at your final number that we did last year. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, next question. We have a regular route and a paratransit grant. Do we put this in our name of the city form, City of Moorhead, regular route, or so we can tell the difference? Yes, you would still have your application describe each, and you actually have 2 applications. You have a regular route and a
Noel,
88. Yes, go ahead.
it was about that new Part 1 allocation form and Part 2 contract award form. For those forms, when you put your name at the top and they send you an email about it, you couldn't tell the difference between the 2 grants if we didn't do something. That's why I was wondering if the name could be City of Moorhead regular route and City of Moorhead paratransit to keep them straight.
Yes. Yep. Make the name different. That way it creates that difference. We'll put that in the instructions, the updated instructions, and get that clarification. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Good suggestion. Okay. What do we have next? Next question. Glenn, could you show us, was there other questions in the chat, or can we save the questions and come back to it, or do we have to do? Oh, you save the questions and go back. Yep. Yep. There's a save button that you will save and then allow you to go back into it. And what it does, if I remember right, you save it and then you will receive a link to go back into it. So it'll send you an email and then you can re-access it through that link email that you receive. Yep. Okay. Significant document request as part of our, oh yes, oh good question. The indirect cost team had significant document requests. Yes, I am well aware of that. As part of their audit of our budgets this year. They will be undertaking this audit during the application review this year. That the team is going to require included in the application. The direction we've received from the indirect cost team is of what they will be reviewing. And they have really focused in on the narratives and having adequate narratives for them to review. So I think that's the best I can answer. I don't know if there's other forms they're going to require or other calculations. I think it's going to rely on what the narratives consist of.
Sorry, Noel. The basic of my question is we had to put a lot of documentation together to show what our methodology was. Is there going to be kind of an outline of what type of documentation they're going to be looking for so that we're not doing that post application, that we can make sure that we have all of that stuff together prior request?
Yeah. We're engaging in conversations with them to try to get to that very answer. It's still a work in progress for us. We haven't been able to nail down what all the documentation is. We will get to the point where there is going to be some sort of template. There's got to be. That's the only way we can manage this. But they provided a sample budget, but they didn't necessarily give us. They gave a lot of latitude in what they were looking for the justification. And I think where it comes into play is, so if you're giving latitude, but then in practice it's different, we need to see that happen. And unfortunately, I think much of that's going to be taking place during this fall. We're going to be learning more about what their standards are. They were not able to articulate them in our initial conversations yet. So, in answer to that, we don't have, I can't guarantee that we have everything that they'll want. But we're, like I said, we're having continual conversations with them to try to become more precise in terms of what their needs are. And it's not necessarily, I do want to say that, and others can weigh in on this, but part of it too is we have the indirect cost team, but we also have MnDOT audit. And the indirect cost team is separate from MnDOT audit. And it seems as if we have a little bit more flexibility with that group than with audit. Audit's coming into this and saying, oh, you need this, this, and this. And so all the groups are not on the same page yet. So
Noel,
we are
Noel,
working on it.
this is Jean. Do you want me to weigh in or not?
Sure, please, Jean. Yeah, because you work with this more day to day than I do. So you can share a little
Okay.
bit, please.
So in answer to the question is, the reason why so many questions are being asked is the narrative in the budget is either missing or lacks detail. And so it led to the IDC team of asking more questions to get clarification to ensure that that the amounts that are put in there are allocable, allowable, and recoverable. So reimbursable. So that's where the premise of this whole process has started. And what we have found along the way is a system may have a methodology, but they haven't been able to show how they got to that methodology, or they haven't been able to show that they have a written documentation that does the math, does in each of the categories. And if they have indirect costs, how do they get to that indirect rate or that allocation? And so those are the areas that we've learned in the last 2 years that we need to work harder on. And then we also learned that for those systems that said they were direct costs, we've learned that there were indirect costs that were sometimes within that budget. And so we had to take those out and find out how did they get to that, and is it still a direct cost or not? And so we're getting through those pains these last 2 years of learning about your budget and how you reached the information in your budget. And so that took a little bit of time to do that. We're hoping that the 2024 application will have that detail in it. But if it doesn't, the questions will be asked. And so as we go through this learning process and figuring out where we are, my suggestion to you would be that the questions that were asked of you in 2023, that you make sure you incorporate those responses within your budget narrative for 2024, that you take that information and you move it forward and try to provide that information in your budget so that we can eliminate some of those questions, but that will help. The indirect team, it consists of the Office of Financial Management. There's 3 personnel that are from there. There's myself, and then there's a person from the Office of Audit. So as a team, we work together on the process. And audit plays a big role in back and forth information. And you'll notice that a lot when you get the response back from the email is Julie or Linda will provide you with the information that audit has asked and would like clarification. Again, if you can take that information from 2023 and make sure that your responses are part of your budget, I think we can eliminate a lot of these questions. We can eliminate a lot of the information, making sure you have available that methodology and how you got to a rate or how you got to an allocation. Those are important aspects. And so if you can work with us on that kind of stuff, I think we can solve the problem.
So I want to support. Go ahead.
Before you start,
I see
just a
time.
recognition that we're going to put a precise and concise written response to every question asked up next week on the website. And so just, you'll have access to this recording, but we're also going to provide written responses to everything.
So first off, with regards to this, Jean gave a great suggestion, which is to use your narratives that you developed to answer your prior pre-award stuff. Use those same type of narratives. If they pass muster once, they're going to pass muster again. So you've got examples to work from. So use the ones you already used. The other thing, which may also help, which I will talk internally with, is to see, and this is an answer for Gary about what OTAT expects to see in terms of the budget narratives. We may be able to pull some real life examples out as best practices and just share those. You take them or leave them, but we do have ones. We have a whole plethora of resources in terms of examples. And so I think if we use real life examples of what people put in their applications, we'll keep it confidential as who you are, but that may address part of it too. This area is real concern for me because just of the timing of when it occurs. I want it to go very smoothly and very efficiently, so it doesn't slow the process down, because it's another step, and we've seen this. Whenever you add a step, you just never know how much time it's going to take. So we'll look at developing, putting together those best practice examples. Okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack the meeting, so I'll just ask
Sure.
one more quick question. So the request that I got, and I don't know how it was for everybody else, but the request that I got was not reflective of what Gene was talking about. I got a request for every single line item and every single cost and every single line item and the methodology behind it. So it wasn't pinpoint on areas of possible concern. It was literally everything. So are we looking then at a different methodology for this one, where they'll be pinpointing individual areas that they have questions about, and not just a full-blown, the entire budget, show me where all of these costs came from?
It will be the same as 2023. So what they looked at is when the IDC, or when MnDOT audit looks at these, if they don't feel there's enough information in there, or there's questions on how you got to that amount, they're going to ask the questions. So it could be, depending on how your narrative is written, they will ask the questions if they feel the narrative does not give the enough detail to help them understand. So hopefully when you're responding on each of your narratives, you'll give that a little bit more information to help them through the process. So that's my hope, is that we can resolve this if we just give that narrative that just gives a little bit more information, so that they can see how you got to that amount. How did you reach that conclusion of that amount? That's what we're really looking for.
And so we will look for best practice examples that address that type of objective. So that's about the best I can give for right now. Okay. Any other new questions?
So difference in between methodologies and rationale / strategies. Can you explain what the difference is?
So the methodology is basically showing your calculations or your math to arrive at that. Strategies is more general, and I've seen a lot of those types of responses. You need to tie it more to some sort of mathematical calculation. It really, that seems to be one of the big issues that the financial side is having, is they need to, whether it's the indirect cost team or audit, that they need to see the math, the math behind the curtain. It doesn't have to be real fancy math or real fancy analysis, but there needs to be some basis to that. And so, as I said, I'll go back to us providing some examples. We'll go through the ones that have been reviewed and approved, and see what examples we can give that are more specific for you to pull from. Okay. There is not a new service grant this year. Nope, that is correct. Yeah, there are some examples provided in the budget narrative. The one thing I would say is those are more theoretical examples. We'll provide best practice examples from actual applications. That's the big difference there. We need real life examples. Okay. Let's see. Sees the amount OTAT told us. What if the cost to operate the transit system exceeds the amount OTAT told us in advance? So, okay, so the two things. So what we are providing you is how much your allowable growth is, which is basically how much state and federal money we can invest. So if your costs are greater than what your budget is, then the options are to reduce your operating costs down to your allowable budget, or to use other resources to make up the budget difference. Because what we really are working from is, while we describe it as a budget, we're really looking at how much federal and state money we can allocate to you, how much we can afford to do. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Screen. Oh, maximize the window. Sorry, yeah. Or fuel rate. Thank you for reminding. Yeah, I've got that into our standard economist, and we'll have a fuel rate. It'll be coming out. I put in a request list, so it should be next week. We should have a fuel rate for you to all use. So that's one piece that we have that to come also. Okay, and we do that for both gas and diesel. So, and then the nice thing is that's like really simple then to calculate, because then you take the rate times your number of miles you anticipate operating, and there's your cost. So we've also had some brief conversations about, well, maybe we do that with other things too, and pre-populate what your budget line items are, because in practice they're looking at your proposed budget, and those numbers change as you expend dollars. That it's never the same. Plus now you move money between line items, or have to cover costs. So the budget you start off, the line item budget you start off at the beginning of the year is not the same one you end up at the end of the year, other than the bottom line. So we recognize that. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? What is required for coordination activities portion? Unmet needs section, there is no new service application. Yeah, so what you're going to be showing is what your unmet need is. So it's in a narrative format. It actually was buried. You had it, historically it's been shown as on your service level chart as an unmet need. So what this does within the it's in the form, and it's in a narrative form rather than within the identifying it as an unmet need. So that's the big difference there. And there are detailed instructions on where to put the unmet need within. We're not asking you to put the unmet need within Black Cat. It's within the questionnaire. Okay, and then the second one about coordination activities. Those tie back to working with other organizations. I think that it involves, if you're providing service to new groups and are working with new transportation opportunities, those types of things. So that would be a couple of the brief things to have under coordination activities. Okay, is there a suggested fuel rate for, fuel rate again, which I just mentioned, there will be one. Could you have a representative from the indirect cost team part of this webinar? Doesn't seem. Yeah, and actually, one thought is we could actually invite them to, I don't know as if an application workshop is as appropriate as maybe one of our other forums, like a TAC meeting, or we'll look at seeing how we might be able to integrate them more into the conversation. So good suggestion. Oh, propane also, yes. Yes, we can. I will get a hold of them and add propane to that. What is the cost to operate the transit? Oh, okay. Troy was asking, what is OTAT going to do with the unmet needs section? What is our objective as transit systems?
Well, so no, before we go on, Tori asked Gary if his question was answered, and
Sure.
we don't have a response to that. Gary, are you still on? And did your question get answered?
So as I'll move on to the second question, which talks about unmet need. How are we going to use it? Well, we're going to be starting our updated investment plan. And so unmet need is used as part of the investment plan. So the narratives that are developed will feed into that investment plan. So that's where that will occur. That will then also quantify what the unmet need. There will be part of the investment plan will be quantifying the unmet need. So that's what we do as part of the investment plans. So that's where that information goes. It's not why we're also going to this approach is because the what we had identified as it was identified as unmet needs as routes in the within our service level report. That from a planning perspective, that's not useful. It doesn't. So we're not looking at putting a lot amount of time into it in terms of identifying specific routes and schedules. No, that's not an unmet need. You got to be a little bit higher level than that. So hopefully that helps. There may be more detail to be worked out when the investment plan is undertaken, but it's not needed here at the application stage. We also recognize that unmet needs, while useful to generate interest in additional funding, part of the majority of our application is trying to use the funding adequately and allocate it out appropriately for what is currently being done. So not to say that we're abandoning the new service concept, but I think we'll have more when we talk about at the TAC meeting in September and talk about priorities. One of the big priorities we got to talk about is unmet need and new service. That's one of the big things we should be on the agenda. So hopefully that answers that question.
But no, it could also be used to feed efforts in discretionary funds and other funding opportunities as a way to meet those needs.
Yeah, good answer there. To put in, okay, so I think I answered that. Oh, not adequate. How do we complete the application? Are we supposed to ignore the extra costs? No, I wouldn't say you would ignore the costs, but the costs. So one of the last year, and this is tied back to there's two reasons why you're showing a budget for based on our funding level, our investment level, basically. And the reason for that is last year we asked for a full budget, and we received pushback from many systems saying, "Why are you asking for all this extra work for us to show a full budget when you're not going to fund it?" And quite honestly, we know we're not going to fund your full budget. We're going to fund, this is the dollar amount we have available, and we distribute it. Anything above and beyond that, that's not something we can fund. It's got to be locally funded. So so we recognize that asking for the full budget wasn't necessary. The other thing too is with the way that audit, and particularly audit, is viewing the budget, and even our grant office use the budget, our application budget. They view that as the application budget as the contract budget. So in other words, your budget, that you can't have an application budget that's different than your contract budget. They need to be the same. And in that world, then we can only really show what we can go to contract with. So showing all the extra from how they're treating our application budgets, it doesn't translate. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, where does the money come from to more consultants, people to do things in the OTAT office? Is there a formula? Okay, so the question revolves around where to get the money from to fund these things. So from Beth. So I think probably the answer to that is we're trying to be creative in what money we can draw in. So one of the things we're looking at doing is, how do we get discretionary monies? So discretionary monies provides an additional resource of funding that we wouldn't typically get. So we're being aggressive in that area. So being aggressive in chasing funding, that's I think a part of it. And I understand about the funding limitations and what funding you have to work within. But we also have those same limitations in terms of what funding we have to work with. So much of our funding is determined is based on the formula, the state funding formula, and while they change the formula, people have to buy new cars. We have to have a strong economy to get us more money for transit, and so how that works out into the future is yet to be determined, and we'll talk more about that in September. But we have also been in a situation, I guess, as we talk about these budget numbers, we diligently try to identify as many resources as we can to keep our funding level whole. So we're trying to have the funding level incrementally go up. And so so those funding opportunities like discretionary monies free up other money that can be used towards our basic services and things. So we're out there trying to bring in money or drum up money that way. But we still are restricted based on how much the federal government and the state give our office. So and we do account for those dollars and try to make it transparent in how the funding's going out. So I guess to the basis of how can you live with a 3%, that's the most prudent funding level we could identify based on the available funding sources we had at hand. So if it were a different funding scenario where we were getting more, it would have been more. I guess the other way to look at this, and we didn't paint this, but if before the legislative session, before the governor and the governor's proposal and before the legislature took action, it was our forecasts for the budgets for this upcoming year were really, really bleak. There were no increases, there were going to be decreases. And so I guess while it's not as much of an increase as needed, at least it was an increase. I guess that's the best I can do in terms of explaining it. So, and we will certainly try diligently to manage the money to always try to give out increases if we can. So, yeah. Let's see. only comment, I agree with Beth. Our expenses have already dramatically increased and continuously. Oh, yes, yes. And we recognize the 3% is a challenge in terms of the funding level. One of the components that created a real snippet for us here, which for lack of any reason, but it impacted us about $10 million, is the legislative action for the local share moving to 5%, because that required a very large increase in investment in the small urban transit side. So to the tune of about 10 million. So those dollars we had to come up with to make up, so that legislative action to change the local share from the perspective of you as providers was a good thing. For us as the state, it reduced our flexibility in terms of what we could do with those dollars, and we had to make up that local share difference, which was very dramatic for the small urbans. So sorry to get too much into that. Oh, and then talking about just trying to explain it to the passengers and what the funding levels mean to them and what the service level. I empathize with that. I was a transit director for 12 years down in Iowa, and we did not have the funding as you have here, as we have here. We're not so fortunate. So we had to reduce service all the time, lay off people all the time. It was not fun, and it's unfortunately part of being in government and social service and however you want to describe it. So I do recognize that, and I know many of the individuals in the Office of Transit who have operational experience also recognize that, and we do feel for what you have to go through. We're trying the best we can to manage the funds. Side funding will be needed to provide for some services. Yes, yeah, and it's recognized that there is going to have to be a larger local investment in terms of funding. There's really, you have federal, state, and local. Those are the three, the tripod, or the three pieces. So if you need money, those are the only three. And right now, the only one we got a little bit more to structurally backfill with state, but we still have there's still a lot of need that we know is
Well, although with state, there are other state besides public transit. One of Beth's examples about dialysis is looking at things like non-emergency service and getting funding for that. I mean, so there are outside funds besides simply going to your locals for a larger local match or a larger local participation.
Yeah. Now, and that's a good point, Glenn. And I do want to say that there are some systems that are looking at doing some financial planning to look how they could bring in outside local resources to help fund their transit systems. So that is an effort that is going on under that planning consultant component. So, and we can share which systems are looking at doing that and what the scopes look like to provide technical assistance in that area. We've had these conversations before, so we know that in many cases, it's not necessarily the transit management that's not interested in pursuing other options. It's your local boards and councils that create challenges. So, okay.
So I'm gonna do a time check, Noel. We
Yeah,
have
please.
5 minutes left in the schedule. I think we have some technical questions. Gary's last one probably needs an answer, although I'm not sure that we have that answer for him. So perhaps for any remaining questions, I'll just reiterate, we have recorded all of the questions. We're recording the webinar. And we'll be providing answers to these questions in writing on the website in the near future.
Hold on, this thing, I'm trying to mute it.
No problem. So in answer to, I do have an answer
Okay,
for Gary's question.
sorry, what'd you say?
The effective date for the county.
Oh, there. We're muted now. So getting back to the question about what should you apply for? Well, there's no need to apply for more than what you're allowed to have. So apply for what up to your allowable budget amount. That's the most you can apply for. Because you apply for more than that, your budget will be reduced to the allowable amount. So yeah, so that was a fairly straightforward question. Hopefully that answered you. Yep. And I'm going to follow up with another side to this too, Gary. So there is a need for us to understand what your full budgets are, but not necessarily as part of the application. We can do that in a much simpler way and gather that at a much higher level without going into all this line item detail stuff to understand what the budget gap is. And we do need that information, but just not in this detailed level that comes as part of the application. So hopefully that helps a little bit in that. I don't want you to think it's disappearing entirely from our thought process. Okay, yeah, so hopefully I answered as best I could. So good questions though. You put me through my paces here today. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that you do in terms of being so diligent with this, and always ask questions. We have no problem trying to answer them. And we're continually trying to be able to explain better. So if there are, if there's something that doesn't make sense or that you just let us know, because we'll work on trying to put the information together better. And I hope you all can attend our TAC meeting this fall. I hope it works out for you. So anything else, Glenn? Anything else I need to give?
So no, the last one thing is, if you didn't get to put a question in the chat and you have a question or you thought of a question along the way, feel free to email it to me. That's on the website. Up here is going to be my email address. Oops. You can copy it that way. It doesn't just automatically show up. Email me, let me know. We're going to then develop written responses to all of these questions that will be published next week and publish on the website next week. That's it.
One more question, the TAC meeting set for this, Melinda, do we have a date set for that? Oh, you responded already. Or did you? Oh, Melinda did respond. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the next TAC date. It is in all of our OTAT updates, and it is, well, sorry, let me find it and I will throw it in the chat. September 27th.
Okay. So that's a Wednesday. So hopefully, or yeah, that's a Wednesday, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you found this useful. If you want to confidentially share your opinion of, I don't know if we have a form that says this was helpful or not, but if you do want to provide any comment back on how good we did, how bad we did, what we missed, whatever, go to Melinda and shoot an email to Melinda. Melinda works with, she's our communication person. And so she gathers this, she'll keep things confidential, but she's also working very diligently to get our communication to a higher level. So hopefully that helps. So I do want to thank everybody who attended today, and again, work with your project manager, and if you have questions, you can reach out to Glenn. Black Cat questions, reach out to Chuck. So hopefully that will work. So I appreciate your time today. If nothing else, everybody have a great day.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.